Hey guys, this is what Deku had Bond's powers, aka what Deku was immortal. Before the video starts, thank you for 3,000 subscribers, and as I said, I'm going to do a face cam live stream either today, Friday, or Saturday. I still don't know. But other than that, let's go into the what if. So in the last video, I explained how Deku basically got his powers and how they basically work. So if you haven't seen part 1, I recommend watching it before this one. And so in part 1, I left off right after All Might told Deku that he was going to inherit his powers. And at this point, Deku doesn't really know what his powers are, mainly because his powers aren't considered a quirk at all. So he's gotten tested twice now, but the doctors have said that he has no quirk, that he's basically quirkless. And so far, all he knows is that his powers give him some sort of super regeneration. He tested it by stabbing his arm, which healed back pretty quickly. He was able to like see through it and see it like heal back, so it's pretty weird. He also didn't really feel any pain when he did it, so he still doesn't know what his powers really are, just knows kind of the basics as of right now. He was also able to somehow pull Bakugo out and pull him like right next to him back when Bakugo was stuck in the sewer monster, which also happened in like episode 1 or episode 2. All Might took Deku to the beach that was filled with garbage and told him that he was going to have to get rid of all the trash before he inherited his powers. When Deku asked why, All Might told him that if his body isn't fit or isn't ready for the power, it could possibly explode, which did kind of scare Deku, but Deku thought that maybe he would be fine, but he still didn't want to take the risk because if his powers aren't quick enough or aren't good enough, then he would die. But on the other side, if they were, then he would be completely fine and would be able to inherit one for all already. But once again, he still didn't want to take the risk. He listened to All Might and started moving some of the trash. He still had a weak body because he never really worked out that much, so it was going to take a bit. He didn't have to worry though because he can't really get hurt. Kind of how when you use too much like if you try to lift something that's too heavy for your body, it's gonna hurt your body. It's gonna tear your muscles and stuff like that. But for Deku, that isn't how it works. Since he has regeneration, it's not gonna really affect him that much. Anytime like his muscles basically did tear or did rip, it basically healed back and actually became a lot stronger than it did before. So every single time is like something hurt him, he got stronger than he was before. He didn't have to worry about eating, although he still did because he did it for extra energy because he still does get tired and extra nutrients because his body is still technically growing even though he drank from the fountain of youth. I explained that in the last video. And so he trained even at school, mainly by using that one thing that he had. That one thing that he had to squeeze, I forgot what it was called. And so yeah, and so he trained at school to get as strong as possible. He even started messing with his powers. He tried to teleport slash pull things to him, but he couldn't figure out how to do it. And after a while thinking, he decided that maybe he would go ask Bakugo for help by like asking Bakugo if he heard him say anything. And it was called, he tried to ask Bakugo, but he just kept on pushing him away and telling him to go away. And eventually, Bakugo did end up talking. He said that Deku screamed something weird like snatch or maybe steal. He doesn't really remember. And after that, he told him to scram. And Bakugo in his head said that we're even now. Because although Bakugo doesn't like Deku whatsoever, he still decided to kind of repay the favor since he did technically save him, although he isn't grateful and does not like to admit it. Deku got back to the beach and saw a piece of trash, and he took out his arm and said snatch, and which ended up basically pulling the object towards him, which comes to him like pretty fast. Sorry, I accidentally hit my mic, so if that was kind of loud, sorry. And which basically come to him pretty fast. He can see that he's basically pulling it toward himself, so he thinks maybe it's some sort of telekinesis, but he doesn't really think about it. He just like shows his arm like to what he wants to pull, and it happens. So he still doesn't know what it is really. He wonders what else he can technically steal and thinks that maybe he's able to steal other things other than physical objects. He decides to test it out by going up to some random person and secretly saying snatch like to him. And to his surprise, it doesn't actually do anything at first. But then he feels a sudden, not burst of power, but like just a little bit more power than he had before. and he notices that the guy that he did it to, the guy basically starts to slump over a bit. Like he has to hang on to the wall and take a breather, and then even when he starts walking, he's a lot more like slower than he was before. And after studying this for a bit, he comes to the conclusion that he can snatch objects and can also snatch physical abilities like strength, stamina, speed, all that. And he follows the guy home, and after a bit, he realizes that the guy's strength and stamina and everything comes back to him, but Deku still feels the power that he got, and he wonders if maybe he's also able to snatch quirks, but he didn't want to test it, and decided to wait and leave it at that until the time is right, or whenever he has to basically use it. After all this, he decides not to use his powers in order to help him because he wants to get stronger by himself and doesn't want to rely on his powers. So he continues. Eventually, after a few months, he finishes. He finishes a bit earlier than canon, like maybe a few days, maybe a week, because again, he still was weak. It was a little bit easier for him. That's why he finished a little bit more early, but overall, still took a while. All Might was still basically amazed about like by how quick he was able to finish it. He basically surpassed his expectations by a bit because he thought that maybe at his speed he wasn't even going to be able to basically take the UA exam because of how slow he was going at first. All Might tells Deku that he's ready to inherit his powers, and Deku is extremely excited until All Might pulls out a string of his hair and tells Deku to swallow it. Deku is basically disgusted, and All Might tells him that he has to somehow have his DNA inside of him, and this is a lot easier than having a blood transplant. And Deku does actually end up swallowing it, and he doesn't feel anything, like any difference. And Deku asks if maybe All Might can somewhat train him on how to use it, and All Might explains kind of the basics on how to use it. Tells Deku that he needs to get even stronger if he wants to be able to use more of it because he only got a small percentage of it. He didn't get all of it. So until he can try out for UA, he trains so he can use more of it. Eventually, the day comes and All Might wishes him good luck. And Deku leaves with a smile on his face, even though he is extremely scared and nervous. That at the point where he can't even think straight, he still ends up tripping, aka falling, and Uraka or Uchako, I don't know how to pronounce that, still ends up catching him. And I'm gonna be calling her Uraka because I'm pretty sure that's what most people called her, and it's a lot easier to pronounce. Deku still ends up freaking out about how he was able to actually talk to a girl for like almost the first time ever. So Deku enters the building, and the rules are explained to everyone. It's here where he eventually meets Ida, which is sitting right next to him for the first time. Ida still says the same things as he still basically complains about the papers and all that. Now it's time for the actual match. Deku goes in and can't really do anything because he doesn't know what to do. He runs away from the big robot things. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. And he does this until he hears a girl scream. He looks behind him to see the nice girl, aka Uraka. He sees that she's trapped basically under some rubble or in some rocks and is about to get crushed by the robot. And Deku stops for a second and tries to think, but realizes that there's no time to think whatsoever, and he jumps as high as he can by using all for one, or one for all. Wait, one for all. Yeah, I think I switched up the words for a second, and by using one for all, he ends up using one for all in order to punch the giant robot, breaking it instantly. And in doing so, he breaks his arm and both of his legs. And as he's falling, he realizes that his arms and legs, or his arm and his both legs, won't actually move, but they still end up healing back to normal. He's about to land on his feet, knowing that he'll be fine. But Uraka still ends up catching him, and she also still ends up throwing up. Then he hears a buzzer and realizes that time's up and he got no points. He even says this out loud, but the judges are still amazed slash surprised that someone was able to take out one of those robots with one punch, because it's not unheard of for someone to break them, but not that quickly, or especially not with one punch. Uraka hears Deku say how he has no points. And the nurse still checks on him because the judges say that his arms turned a weird color, kind of gray, and it looked basically broken as he was falling down. And the nurse checks on him, but there's nothing wrong, so he heads home sad, thinking that there's no way that he passed. Until a few days later, he gets a letter from UA, and All Might's there telling him that he passed, and how Uraka even went to the judges to give him her points, but the judges said that there is no need because there's something called saving powers. I forgot what they're actually called, but the points are saving points. Sorry, because the amount of points someone can get by saving someone or saving something, and he gets enough to pass. Deku still ends up crying out of happiness, even tells his mom, and his mom still ends up crying out of happiness. And that's where I'm going to leave off this what if. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Once again, thank you for 3,000 subscribers, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.